Yeah, welcome to the day 3 of Excavating Texts. Sorry for the delay of the few minutes. Our first question for today is actually linked to what we were talking about yesterday. If we surrender, what will we have to say or write and write? Isn't deliberate action the source of the urge to communicate? So if we don't actually do anything, what are we going to talk about?
Right. The second part of the question is interesting. Isn't deliberate action the source of the urge to communicate?
Yeah, so surrendering is in that sense ceasing,
The opposite.
Yeah, just deliberate action.
But is deliberate action the source of the urge? I mean, doesn't the urge predate the action?
Deliberate action might actually, the thought that you can actually deliberate on a sequence of events, right? Even though you very well might not be able to do anything. So, I mean, I'm saying in a given situation, when you know that nothing is worth doing,
Mm-hmm.
and
Okay.
and you still know that you can do many things,
Yeah.
but nothing is worth doing.
Right.
So you could look at those two situations as something, a situation in which you're surrendering and a situation in which you go on
Choosing to act.
deliberating. Yeah, you go on trying to deliberate and perform action. So so our personhood might actually have a lot, to do with that kind of sequence of deliberate action. So
it's interesting because deliberate can be two meanings, which is okay, deliberated action. You thought about
something you do and you know you're doing it.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, this makes sense. Yeah. And then the first part. So in that case, what will we say and write?
Yeah.
It's good that for me at least, to establish the foundation of where the action is coming from or why it's happening, and then if that is the foundation, then what do we have to say and write?
Yeah, most of our most of what we consider worth communicating is either something that we are thinking, doing, or stating, in terms of our positions or our whatever, how we like to be known as, or telling stories about what we did, what you dreamt, what we want to do, our vision.
It's almost like we are creating a vision now.
We are creating
a vision. But see, I have to speak something, so I have to do something. So what do I speak?
Yeah, so exactly. So basically, I mean, I think just to maybe distill it down, maybe it could just be, if we, don't do anything, then what can we say? What do we have to say? Because what we seem to fill up our conversations with are
what we do.
It's either reportage or plans, desires of things we want to do.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that is I mean, looked at in a
Yeah.
in a
There
specific
is,
enough way. I mean, in the sense, if you zoom out, if you just try to, if you acknowledge the landscape you're living in as a kind of complex situation, and
mhm,
uh, I mean, like we were talking about last time, that it's a zero sum
mm,
situation, and that whatever you're going to do is not really going to change that the
mm,
balance, right?
mhm,
So then what will we have to say? So how can we look at the role of communication or the role of language in terms of how it helps us communicate? How can we look
right.
at that as something that doesn't have anything to do with our deliberate action?
Mm. And the thing that occurs to me again is the environment. I mean, the environment seems to have, like, why speak, really? There's nothing to say, there's
Hmm.
nothing to do. And so, if the environment expects a certain type of communication just because of how it is, most often, to generalize. And if that's the case, then there's nothing to report, there's nothing to say.
Environment requires a particular kind of action, you're saying,
Hmm.
and uh, in its requirement, it succeeds. So we are
Hmm.
doing what the environment needs us to do, right? I mean, that's
Or,
what
or,
you were saying, right? Yeah.
I think I was saying the opposite, which is the environment expects the individuals to be doing certain things and to be speaking about certain things that they're doing or whatever it is, like I said, reporting, etc. But if the individual has nothing to say anymore,
Hmm.
then, I mean,
Yes,
nothing. Mhm.
I mean, they could easily be, we could think of easily uh, of outsourcing the whole conversational layer of our life to these tropes, which are,
Mhm.
you know, yeah, reporting on what we do, because we don't really add any sentiment to it by doing the reportage ourselves.
But what if we're not doing anything? I
Yeah,
mean, we can report anything we like. Just to please the environment, we can report anything.
yeah, but at some level, you hit a wall of constraints. Like, if you have yeah, let's say you have a fantasy, you like to
Hmm.
imagine yourself as a very busy person who has a lot of things going on, a lot of resources,
Productivity.
yeah, and a lot of course, money and all that.
Hmm.
Then you can maybe you can do some things to project some of those things, but
Correct. Correct.
but you can't manufacture the cash.
Correct. Correct. Precisely. And you
So
can play that game, you can play that role, but if your own self is okay with it, that's fine. But if the self is not accepting it anymore, then what?
I mean, I think what we're stumbling into is the understanding actually that no matter what is okay with yourself to enact, no
Hmm.
matter what you want to project and what is okay with yourself to project,
Hmm.
there are in any case going to be some things which depend on external factors
Right.
which you don't control,
Right.
and
And
as far as those external factors are concerned, you are doing nothing.
Right.
So as far as the country's military is concerned,
Hmm.
we are not doing anything.
Correct, 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 correct.
They are doing everything.
Hmm.
So there is always it's always possible to, I mean, it's just a matter of how deeply you acknowledge your own uselessness.
Correct, correct, correct. And if you acknowledge it, if you truly acknowledge that, and there's different levels of uselessness. I mean, uselessness from the perspective of whoever defined what useful is.
Yeah, I mean, someone will always find us useless, and
Hmm.
in cases, in, in situations where you're actually countering if you're trying to swim against the current, those might be most of the perspective. So it's maybe everyone considers you to be
Hmm.
useless, and actually uh, that sounds a very interesting perspective to me, as in the the inverse of actually our attention economy, right? It's the
Yes,
inverse of that. So
yes.
how many people think, in how many people's perspective you're absolutely useless would determine your
Hmm.
actual value
Right.
in challenging the you know the the perspectives which value use and disuse and
Exactly.
all of that.
Yes. And I can attribute if usefulness in the sense that I am challenging someone else's notions of usefulness, therefore, I'm pushing their envelope and I'm bringing about growth. That's one way to justify it.
And bringing about growth.
Growth in the other person's perspective because I have
Yeah,
pushed their envelope.
right.
But then that could be just another way of rationalizing my own sense of my own uselessness.
Yeah. So, but so you're saying uh, your contribution to, let's say, others knowing more about you, let's say,
Hmm.
so is a way in which you are creating value by helping them expand.
Yes,
But how do you get them to acknowledge that this is value?
correct. Exactly. Exactly. And that's the thing. Yep. Exactly. And sounds like that's one place where speaking up starts happening.
Picking up. Uh, I mean, it actually. I mean, this could trigger both kind of
Yep.
responses.
Hmm.
You might either speak up, or you might just learn to shut yourself up.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
So it's if you have this knowledge of being perceived as useless,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you might not feel like saying anything more.
Exactly. Exactly. Because I'm just being. I'm not doing. I'm just being. And if that's difficult for whoever else to understand, it's not really my problem.
Right.
That's one way of looking at it. So I don't have to say anything. On the other hand, if there is a different urge of wanting to communicate or wanting to be understood or whatever it is, then maybe some words might come out.
But don't all such words also tend to come out from the space of, let's say, oh, I want someone to understand how
Yeah.
I do things, why I do things, why don't I do something else. So, I mean,
Yes.
it's like once you, I mean, in deliberate action, what you're actually doing is specifying in a in a in a in a set of detailed ways.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
specifying how you do things,
That is true. That's true.
and you
I
want to
can see
talk
that.
about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you find that.
Exactly. I mean, it's like we were saying just a little while ago about trying to, I don't know, you said something which I've forgotten now about defining what you're doing,
Hmm.
what one is doing to the other person. Uh, it's like you
Yeah,
get framed. If you don't frame yourself, somebody else frames. And if there is a need or one cares about how the frame is being placed, then one might offer the frame oneself.
right. But that is work.
Yes.
I mean, positioning yourself
Yeah.
for yourself or for somebody else's consumption. Both are work.
Correct.
Work which is, of course, which goes unacknowledged, uncompensated, or and
Correct.
whatever else. But
That is true. Yes.
so that takes us towards our second question
Hmm.
for the day, which is slightly long. I think it might actually be three questions in one. Is motivation a factor in determining our action? Are communities a source of motivation? How is action performed in isolation?
Right. And I think the first question actually comes in very nicely from the past discussion of there's something that motivates one to do something. If I want to frame myself and not want somebody else to frame me, then I am motivated to do something about it.
Yeah, but this motivation of doing something
Hmm.
will will take you away from doing nothing, right? I mean,
If I am motivated to do something, it means I'm no longer motivated to do nothing.
yeah. Now the question is motivation itself worth looking at,
Hmm.
as in which tools, I mean, what is motivation, and is the character of the motivating agents, the
Hmm.
desires, actually, the set of desires that you call motivation,
Hmm.
what are those? So I mean, different set of things motivate different people,
Correct, correct. That's right.
but
I mean,
so let
again,
yeah.
we can go into the whole nature nurture thing, you know, and environment, nature nurture and current environment could all determine what the motivating factors are. There are a gazillion number of them.
Yeah, if we just look at, if you don't look at it in its sociological sense, if you
Okay.
don't look at it as motivating factors for groups of people, you just look at motivation for individuals, I mean,
Yeah.
rather, instead of for individuals, let's just zoom in further and say motivation for us, for you, for me, for what we for who we know, right?
Okay. I mean, I'm still not able to move away from, what my character is, what my nature is, what my temperament is, what my construction is, how my construction happened over time, and what my current factors are. I'm not able to move away from that in determining what my motivation is.
Right. No, so okay. So let's say that you have a very you have access to a very clear vision of
Okay.
who you are and what you want to do, and
Mm-hmm.
and also why you want to do it. So you have this clear picture in your head.
Okay. Okay.
Now, what this involves is you working tirelessly
Mm-hmm.
in essentially narrating your vision,
Mm.
which
Yeah.
might involve a kind of colonial, uh, you know,
Mm.
colonization of other minds, let's
Yes.
say,
Yes. Understand. Understand.
right? So,
Yeah.
at one point, essentially, if you have to decide, okay, do I get to do what I do,
Mm.
or does someone else get to do what they do?
Right.
And you might, I don't know, most people, it's not a question of most people, it's a question of actually, yeah, just what do you do then? Do you go on trying to colonize, or do you at some point really hold yourself back,
Mm-hmm.
and at that point you have and at that point you come back to the point zero, which is
Mm.
that you are motivated to do something which involves you to do something else which you don't want to do. So
Right.
you don't
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
then again don't have motivation to do anything.
Correct. You have to reevaluate.
Yeah. So what happens then?
Correct. Correct. And that's the thing. That's the thing. It's like the vision itself. The vision may still be there, but this methodology is now in question as to I don't feel like colonizing anymore.
Yeah. For whichever reason, either people
Hmm.
are the reason could be or not. So many people are getting colonized,
Correct.
or
I'm not really a very good colonizer. I don't know how to colonize very well. That could be another reason.
yeah, or it could be about discovering that my act of colonizing people is actually
Hmm.
giving is about giving a lot, and
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
feel so generous right now. I don't
Exactly. Yeah.
want to give so much.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense. Or the vision itself in question is being questioned in the sense there might be doubt about the vision itself.
Yeah, I mean, doubt is something which we cannot actually think of, because uh,
Okay.
that
We're
is,
keeping that aside.
I mean, in the sense that doubt is uh, at a moment before you have made up your mind.
Okay, but what I'm saying is doubt arising because of the process of colonizing, which shows me new information, which says that, you know, there's a
Yeah,
reason why,
yeah.
yes,
So
so,
yeah, things are not happening as fast and
right.
as whatever as you might
Hmm.
have wanted them to be.
Correct. And that sounds again like when we speak of colonization, it sounds like communities. And the second question, are communities a source of motivation?
Yeah, so I mean, this community question and the isolation question next are linked, in the
Yeah.
sense that okay, you might think that okay, so if there is a body of people involved, then
Hmm.
there might be more motivation to do something. Now, I
Or,
don't know if
or
that's
not.
or not, but
Yeah.
with this that brings in again the whole audience question, right?
Audience and
So
also, yeah.
I mean, so yeah, will you sing as passionately in a room which has one person
Hmm.
as in a stadium with 100,000 people.
Correct. Sure. That's one way of looking at it. But the other way is like creating with a community. I mean, our community is a source of motivation because if we are creating, how is action performed in isolation? Okay, so if we are looking at action as towards the audience, I mean, the audience might actually inhibit me from the pure action.
Sure, but then I mean, I'm just yeah, at this point looking at these three things, so looking at so okay, what gets you started is motivation. Motivation seems to come from somewhere out there, right? So
Or inside, right? I mean, does motivation always come from outside?
I mean, so inside, then let's say it's it's in isolation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So motivation is there. I mean, it's needed for you to do something, but it's either coming from out there or it's coming in
Okay.
from yourself in isolation.
Okay. Okay.
But
I guess that's
what is this motivation towards, right?
yeah. And where is it coming from?
Yeah. So I mean, the kinds of motivating forces that I am aware of, I mean, for example, right now, are generally towards the outside,
True.
right? So even if it is an isolation, like we were talking yesterday, even if it's an isolation, you might be singing a song to somebody in your head,
Yeah.
right? And that motivates you to sing the song. Being able to imagine that person, that listener inside your head.
I don't know necessarily. I don't know if that's the only case. I mean, there is a case where there is no audience. Because there does not need to be an audience. It's the act of singing itself that is self-motivating. I mean, there's some place where a spring is coming out of. And it doesn't need anything to bring it out. It's like I feel like doing this, so I'm doing it.
Right. So you're saying that there is no motivation involved. But
Maybe.
from getting yourself out of your room to go somewhere and perform somewhere,
right?
It takes motivation, right? Otherwise,
yes,
you just be where you are.
Right. That is true. And that motivation may not. Where does it come from? Like maybe it doesn't come. Maybe
It's
the
already
person.
there.
Yeah. I mean, it could come from outside, obviously, but if it comes from outside, but it's not coming from inside, there is a conflict of, is this real? Is this motivation real? Am I being forced to do something? Do I really want to do it? Do I feel like doing it? That conflict,
Yeah, because from your state of surrender, your state of being absolutely useless, you're actually at least now considering that, okay, something might be worth doing. But what is that worth? In that
Yeah.
sense, is it the core around which we bind around, spin around our entire sequence of and the entire story of who we are and what we are and how we are,
Right.
or is motivation that it's that story that something that we'll do will lead to something that will happen. So is
And
it a desire for something to happen that is motivation, or is it that urge to be and become somebody? I mean, just as in by your own self. I mean, just as in, so
yes.
like when you're trying to go off addiction, you
Yeah, correct.
hold on to the idea of yourself who doesn't need anything, who doesn't need to depend on any
Right.
substance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is also a kind of motivation. And I
Yes.
think that's the kind of motivation we are talking about.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I mean, see, I think I'm not looking at, I go to work because I have to feed myself. I'm not looking at that kind of motivation. I'm thinking in terms of doing something because I feel like it.
Okay.
Does that make
No, but
sense?
yeah, but just like this feeling like it
Yeah.
is coming from,
Yeah, and that,
like we are always incomplete, right? So we are always in motion.
right, right, right.
So, but there are already things we have set off in motion some time back, whenever,
Hmm.
I don't know,
Hmm.
which are seeds of desire that want to be something. So
Right.
either you go
Hmm.
along, or you try very hard to obstruct, right? To not be something, and which
But
is
but what if there is no impetus anymore to go along or to not even do anything about it? I mean, I may have set off a desire in motion, but it's just there. So, it'll wither away on its own. Nothing will happen
right.
because I maybe there is no meaning anymore in that.
No, but that is the moment of collapse, right? So that is the moment of collapse in the addict's kind of pathway, or
Mhm.
rather process, where
Hmm.
it doesn't work out.
But doesn't work out, or could it also be, not finding satisfaction in it anymore? See, I could have
But
been
I
this.
mean, so not finding satisfaction in uh, becoming de-addicted is the de-addiction program not working out?
But see, addiction, we are looking at it, addiction can be seen as a thing that we want to get rid of. So, see, desire is two types, could be different types. I mean, but one type is I have to inject this drug into myself despite knowing that it's bad for me, and I want to de addict myself from that. But on the other hand, there is setting into motion desires in the past, such as I had this dream of painting this masterpiece, but it's on its way. I have been pushing myself for whatever reason it's been going, but now I don't see any point in it. I don't see why it doesn't even, the desire that existed a long time ago doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah, so how do we remind ourselves? Do we need reminders?
Or do we? I mean, or have we outgrown it? We don't need it anymore.
No, but then what you're saying is potentially going to set me on a collision course with mortality, right? I'll just die. I mean, I'll
No, but I might live in a different way.
how?
Maybe I find that collecting stones and putting them together into a shape makes me feel, I feel like doing this now.
No, but I'm still going off the substance, right? So I mean, that is the
Hmm.
motivation I'm talking about. I mean, it's like you are going off something because you have a desire to become something which you have to practice by being something every day.
So
you
do
know.
you want to, is your desire to go off the substance?
That is what we are backing on. If so, it's a.
Okay.
I mean, de-addiction can only be performed by someone voluntarily, and
Okay,
not.
so okay, we are taking that case where we are wanting to go off of a substance.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just going into this to think about how it might work, right?
Hmm.
So if you have this version of a story running in your head of in which you don't want to do something, but you want to do
Mhm.
something else,
Yeah.
but then there is no other way of doing that
Hmm.
except by doing it,
Going,
start by
yeah,
starting to do it already,
correct.
like you know, and
Hmm.
stick to it.
Right. I mean, if there is the desire to go off of the substance, then yes, I mean, it's pretty clear that no matter what, something has to be done and stick with it.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Yes, I was looking at a different case altogether, not a de-addiction case. But if we stick with de-addiction, that's I see what you're saying.
Right. So actually, then we realize that. I mean, I'm realizing right now,
Uh-huh.
actually, that we mythologize these things we do in life to such a degree that
Mm-hmm.
it assumes very large and grand proportions, right? So in the sense, this whole narrative of being an artist or
Mm-hmm.
being somebody,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, is such a mythologized narrative that it it so
I mean, it's
say.
very closely tied with identity, right?
Yeah,
I
I mean
mean,
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, which
yeah.
is it's tied in with identity in a very close
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, because you see, identities are defined in different ways. Like you said, I mean, the audience is defining me as an artist, or I need to define myself as an artist because I think the audience wants me to define myself as an artist. But
Huh. But my being an artist
hmm,
might actually require me to
hmm,
be a private artist,
that's also there. That's exactly right. That's the other
and
thing. That yeah.
that is
Hmm.
then in direct conflict with my being
Yes.
an artist at all.
Like if I say that I'm an artist, I'm not an artist.
Yeah, I mean, so it
Yeah.
puts it in direct conflict with that. So
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
what I'm realizing now is maybe it's possible to be whoever you might
Hmm.
need to be, want to be, whatever,
Hmm.
but essentially in your own isolated context.
Yeah.
And outside that, it doesn't really matter what you do and what you don't,
Hmm.
and because it's not really possible to always align the
Hmm.
motivation, your
Hmm.
motivation to do what you need to do.
Correct. Correct.
It's not always possible to align that
Hmm.
with the needs of this whole bubble that you live in, so you
Hmm.
feed the monsters and
Correct. Correct. Correct.
you
Correct.
basically
Correct.
make it a whole charade of trying to
Yeah. Yeah, because if
find.
no art is happening right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not an artist, just because no art is happening.
Right. I mean, essentially that's a very private kind of a choice, or
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a choice that, okay, if you think you're an artist, and if you need to be
Hmm.
that, whatever you
Hmm.
think that might be,
Yeah.
then that is strictly up to you.
Yeah.
So, uh, and then something else, mm, you might need to do something else to
Hmm.
really try and pay your bills or do whatever,
Right.
and that need not have anything to do with anything else.
No, I agree with that. I mean, everything is really in isolation. It's like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that this person is this or that person is that.
Yeah, because it's, I mean, it, that the process of actually de-addicting made me think of this,
Hmm.
because an addict or someone who's not an addict are only, it's only a question, it's question of being honest to yourself within your own,
Yeah.
self-image.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
it's not a question of actually hiring a policeman to look after you and make sure you comply with what you have decided.
Yeah.
It's
It's interesting you bring the addiction because I'm trying to relate that to the image of being an artist.
huh.
See, you could be addicted to the idea of being an artist, or you could be being an artist. I mean, it's kind of like authenticity in a way.
Hmm.
So maybe I'm holding on to an idea of being something because I'm expected to, or because I think I should, or
Yeah,
whatever.
because maybe that's all that you have ever
Hmm.
done. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe the only way of the only way you've seen yourself ever
correct. Correct.
has been in this through this mythological construction.
Right. Right. And the de-addiction process is where, in a way, it's a collapse because I'm challenging my very foundations. And I'm asking myself, is this who I really am? Like, am I really an artist? What is this artist?
But this is fantastic. I mean, I think we should run a de-addiction
Yeah, I
program
agree.
for artists and
Yeah.
really trying to have them, because it brings up a lot of discomfort very quickly,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
in the
Yes.
same
Yes.
way as it does in an alcoholic
Yeah.
whom you're trying to say that you drink too much,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
because it's maybe a very uh, closed, it's a very close identification.
Yes. 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 And that's sort of like also a ceiling because if that ceiling is not broken, development sort of is within that ceiling, even of the art. That's what I feel like.
Right.
Like it's like some people just, I mean, in my opinion, some people create some things which are repetitions of what was before. There's nothing new there.
Right.
I mean, nothing wrong with that or anything, but the point is, it to
That
me,
I mean,
yeah,
they're able to do that because the living with the construct of being an artist allows them to do that.
right, 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 right. I mean, depends on the motivation also. For me, the motivation might be that I want to create or I want to push the boundary or whatever. So I need to shatter the existing mold.
Hmm. Which actually brings us to our third question,
Hmm.
which is, if constructs in language need to be architected,
Hmm.
then how does drifting and meaning making reconcile with each other?
Mm.
So if you to say something, if you actually have to say it in that, in that sense, like, line up logic of that kind
Hmm.
for me to understand it, then, and if you want to drift in
Mm.
in the scope of language,
Mm.
but we also want to make a point,
Hmm.
then how do we do both of them at the same time?
Yeah. The direct way of when I'm looking at this question in a very direct way, the way it seems is allowing the language to wander about, allowing exploration without any intent and without any expectation could be a way to eventually for meaning to arise on its own. And when that drift is done in a way where inputs are coming from external places, then it pushes the drifter to look at various perspectives, and maybe some meanings may arise.
So drifting is a way of actually traveling, you're saying. So drifting in a construct of language might work in the way that traveling works. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
move around and you familiarize yourself with
Yeah, correct.
a lot
Like
of
if I'm,
other
yeah,
perspectives.
yeah. Like I might be, if you take the travel, like you said, it's like you're in a place where you don't know anything, you're lost, and you sort of make your own landmarks, familiarize yourself, that sort of thing.
Right. So then what you are what you're doing is yeah, you're working at a level which is more meta than language as well, right? So you are
Mm.
zooming out one more level,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because yeah, I have not been essentially, I've not been able to reconcile drifting, which is something I enjoy doing a lot.
Uh-huh.
And
How are you seeing this?
I mean, yeah, I don't really know how to reconcile drifting and meaning making in the sense
Hmm.
that the logic of text
Hmm.
actually doesn't allow drifting. So if you want to
Hmm.
make a point, you have to make it. You can't keep going on
See, but
detours.
uh, not necessarily. Well, it depends because
I
see
mean,
the
if you go on,
text.
I mean, you have to carefully
Hmm.
manipulate it or construct it in the sense that if you go on detours, that's
Hmm.
fine, and then you have to come back. I mean, you have to control that in the sense you're so that the going away doesn't mean that you really disappear.
Hmm.
You might have to steer the going away back home at
But
some
why?
point.
Why do you have
No,
to?
I mean otherwise the reader will just get lost.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, if you leave the reader up to their own devices with this piece of text, they will make their own meaning.
Yeah, but not a meaning that
You want to.
yeah, I mean, which is essentially the conflict that is within text, right? So, or
Yeah.
within
Okay.
any kind of communication that you want to say
Convey.
something,
Hmm.
and at the same time, of course, and what you want to say, the reader or the audience will never, I mean,
Yeah.
get in a very distilled form. But
Hmm.
let's say if they are separated by three counts, what you say
Mm-hmm.
and what they get.
Okay.
Even if they're separated by three counts, then if you say something which is anything at all,
Hmm.
then even if it is not that what you're saying, but they'll get
Mm-hmm.
something else, but they'll get
Hmm.
something at all, So in a sense, they'll
Hmm.
get at least something from just by the benefit of your linking through all the
Hmm.
fragments and leading them somewhere.
Correct. So there has to be a certain number of clues that are given. So the drift could be controlled in that sense where like even like earlier we talked about traveling, you are lost in a place, but you are lost in a place. You are not lost in what you don't know what it is. You're lost in a specific
Yeah, so let's say you're
construct.
lost in a place. You're
Yeah,
lost in a locality of a city. You're lost in
correct,
Tokyo, let's say.
correct.
Now what happens? Now
I mean, you do have a certain, the thing is, fortunately or unfortunately, there are certain parameters that you do have. You know you're in Tokyo, you know you are lost. You know that this is what is around you. So there is and I think that goes with the text in the similar way. If the text is constructed in such a way that it is, some context is given, then meaning could be constructed. If the goal is to convey a specific meaning through the text,
Yeah, yeah. At least it'll become another experiment in the whole exercise of meaning making, right? It won't
yeah, yeah.
it won't be terribly simple and it won't work like it always does, but
Hmm.
something might emerge.
Yeah, because see, what I'm hearing now is a process of discovery where a certain number of clues are given, but the person has to discover it for themselves, which is what happens a lot of times with some of the authors that I like to read are people who are not explicit in what they are saying. You have to figure it out yourself. You have to, the reader has to do the work.
But I mean, that's often more possible in poetry, right, than in prose.
I
In
mean, even in
prose,
prose. No, I mean, for example, to use a very trivial example, is like some of these books on social human complexity, where you have characters
mm,
which are very complex and they're interacting with each other. Now, it's not explicitly stated what each person is thinking, or they just have sentences that they, especially in like older writing from, say, the Victorian times or something, things are not explicit. You have to figure it out. What is this Jane Eyre thinking, or whatever? Or this, what's the name in that Pride and Prejudice?
right.
Which to me is very interesting because they are hints, and or some of
No,
these
but those hints are being exploited to
hmm.
analyze the text, right? That's a
Or no, to
particular
get the story itself.
okay. So not to get the subtext or something.
Not necessarily. For like even some of these Japanese sort of stories where the things and the story is not explicitly stated. You बाद में घर जाके चमकता है कि हाँ ऐसा हुआ करके.
Acha. Okay.
It's like you are implanted, certain seeds are implanted in the brain which your neurons haven't fired in the moment when you're reading it. Later on, when you sit with it and you let your thoughts drift here and there, the neurons associate themselves, and that sequence fires, and that's when the realization happens.
Yeah, because like for me, this comes from a conflict where
Hmm.
I want to write sometimes, but I don't
Mhm.
want to have a very clear point, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah, agreed.
I don't want to make a point which is very
Yeah.
absolute, like what I have done in the past, and it's
Hmm.
like okay, sometimes I have maybe wanted to state things in a very fixed way,
Hmm.
but now I don't feel like doing that because I feel like giving myself more space to
Hmm. Hmm.
breathe in,
Hmm.
and otherwise, if you're just living with a lot of absolutes, then
Hmm.
there is no space for slippage.
Correct,
It's
correct. But this is in conflict with what we are saying about earlier, which we said we want, there is a point to the text, or you're trying to convey something to the audience. So that's in conflict then.
yeah. I mean the whole drive of the narrative, the whole
Hmm.
drive of the text, which is in a way organic. It's not something which you can. I mean, so in the sense, if you write a sentence, a
Hmm.
sentence has to make sense. You can't particularly write at a gibberish, right? So in the
Okay.
sense, you have to write a sentence that makes grammatical sense or which holds together. Not
Which
a
holds together,
sentence,
yeah. Which
yeah,
holds
not,
together is a better way to put it, yeah.
and then the sentence after that, you need to link in some way to the previous sentence.
By some logic, which may not be the standard logic.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like this opens up now for me
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I mean, so it could be an adventure like that, which is
Yeah.
an adventure which allows text to be more of a word puzzle actually.
Yes, exactly right. That's exactly, and that's kind of how I look at poetry also, because poetry for me, abstract poetry at least, it's like a bunch of images which the reader, I may have a point which I'm trying to convey, and even within abstraction, I feel like there's ways in which points can be very sharply conveyed through very specific imagery,
Yeah.
which, like you said, it's a puzzle. The person goes away and later on puts the pieces together. It may not be apparent right there because you are sort of engaging with the words and trying to make the logical sense out of it. You are applying your grammatical rules or whatever, and you don't see that they are working. But there is some other logic.
Right. So, I mean, in the uh, so just referring back to the to an earlier conversation,
Mm-hmm.
when you're saying that, so I'll take a surface at a time
Mm-hmm.
and write about that, and
Mm-hmm.
so what would is something predetermined in terms of what you need? Let it be, so it needs to be a poem of a kind, or it can be fragments of prose.
It could be anything, either ways,
So
whatever
yeah,
comes
I
out.
mean, so it's not you. So you don't need a fixed format of things.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, no, I'm not looking. I'm seeing very. I mean, again, I'm not looking at the productivization as much because that tailoring can happen late at a later stage or whatever. But if it can be very free and open, like what does a surface trigger when a surface is being looked at? What does it trigger? That's one way to look at it. Or if there is a certain meaning that is trying to be conveyed, can that be shaped into something?
If there's a certain meaning that
So
needs to
I
be conveyed,
conveyed.
can it be
So I
shaped into something?
correct. So I already know what I want to convey. Can I put it into? I already know what I want to convey. What does the shape of that look like? So
So the shape of that,
hmm,
would that be another surface, right?
yeah, exactly,
Right. Okay. So the surfaces which we encounter and the surfaces which we populate.
which we populate. Yeah, and it could be any interpretation. It could be like you were saying 2 days ago about surface of experience, like what is
Yeah.
behind the surface. So
Right. Because yeah, I mean, yeah, that will. I mean, I think maybe at the onset, I mean, in the in the beginning, it might be, yeah, just interesting for me to maybe then go in and specify
hmm,
what the surface, which surface are we talking about,
hmm,
and
yeah,
not in a, yeah, not maybe in a very, yeah, I mean, I think I want to break out of the voice which I've been
hmm,
writing so much in, which has been a very, which has almost, yeah, it has become a very dry and
hmm,
laborious voice for me now. So
hmm, hmm.
I want to try and be more fluid
Okay.
in how I state,
Hmm.
because the stating should also be an aid in questioning, you know,
I'm
instead of
sorry, the stating.
the stating can also be an aid in questioning,
Okay.
you know, instead of it just being as a stream of knowledge, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, 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 yeah,
it
yeah, yeah.
can be it can be triggers for
Yes,
questioning.
yes. Yeah, yeah. It could be, and the trigger for creating an image within somebody, within the audience, instead of
Yeah,
explicit statement. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else that you'd like to, you know,
Uh,
talk about with the three questions we had today? Because, or in the previous 2 days, because
hmm.
it's the concluding session of excavating text. So we can, yeah, we just try and wrap up, or we can just conclude.
Yeah, I guess I was trying to think about what your rules, right? Like meta rules of sharp communication. I feel like I don't know if we went into that enough. And today's last question, I feel like gave a clue towards framing those rules. That's this one thing today. And
Uh,
that framing of the rules is something I was predisposed when I approached everyday session, thinking that you know
yeah.
what are these rules, right? So
Yeah, I think yeah. I mean, I think just taking up the rules in themselves as
hmm,
another, you know, writing or whatever. I mean, just trying to draft out some rules and
hmm,
similar to way we tried to make the charter
yeah,
would be quite worthwhile. So I'll draft a set of rules and send them to you, and you can feel free to add some or remove some or something like that, and
okay,
we we can then make something and maybe put it up. No?
sounds good. Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. So we'll stop the broadcast for today,
all
and
right,
I'll write to you soon about starting the whole surface conversations.
sounds great.
See you. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.